But if you want to learn about transitions and animations, then welcome to the tutorial. Alright, so there was my intro. I hope you liked it because it took me like 8 hours to make that sick beat. So yeah, transitions, aka we're going to learn how to move crap across the screen basically. And later on, aside from like basic animations, I'm going to be showing you guys something called scene transitions, which you can pretty much take an entire scene and switch it for the user, and it kind of plays into what we're going to learn later on. Pretty much these thing called intents, and it's pretty much how you change entire views for the user. But anyways, I'm kind of overwhelming you guys. I know it already. Way to go, Bucky. Way to go. So let's go ahead and get started with a new project here. And I'm just going to name this tranny. It's just short for transitions. So I'm just going to hit next right there. And another thing I want to point out, make sure that you're using API 19 for the minimum, because even though it's not going to target all of the devices for this tutorial, we're going to be using some libraries and, well, just compatible that way. So again, 19, unlike before when we were just using Froyo. Let's move up to KitKat. By the way, kind of ironic, um, Christmas was 3 days ago, and my grandma got me a huge bag of Kit Kats. So, what do you guys care about that? What am I even talking about? Anyways, so let's go ahead and choose blank activity. Next. And that's good right there. Doesn't really matter what you name it. Alright, so our interface is looking sweet. Let's go ahead and change this app theme to anything else. Let's do material. Let's do material dark. Let's switch it up a little bit. I forgot I named it Tranny. How did I forget that? It was like 2 seconds ago. It gets me every time, aka one time. Alright, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to delete this text view because, as you know, I hate it. And I'm going to drag a button here. Ooh, this one looks good. So drag that bad boy right there. And what this tutorial is going to do is it's going to essentially add a really basic animation to this button, transition, whatever you want to call it. It's going to take this button and we're going to move it in the bottom right hand corner, and I'll also grow it by a little bit, or enlarge it, I guess you might want to say. And this is going to happen whenever the user touches anywhere on the screen. So pretty basic demonstration. User taps the screen, button moves to the bottom right corner, boom, roasted. So I know you guys are thinking, like, but Bucky, shouldn't you give these things ID so we can reference them in the Java code? Oh, you silly old Englishman. Yes, yes I should. So the first thing I want to do is give this relative layout, which is pretty much your entire screen, in ID, because we're going to be tapping that and we need to listen for taps. So ID, by the way, this screen, I tapped that. These jokes, they keep getting worse. Alright, so anyways, 1 second, let me just laugh at my own joke a little bit more, and done. Alright, so I'll just name it Bucky's layout. That was a good joke, though. That was good, that was good. And for this button, I am just going to name this Bucky's button. Should name it Bucky's butt, but that's a little bit immature if you ask me. So now we have a very basic interface, a layout and a button, and they both have IDs. And you know what, I'm not even going to fix this because don't give a F about the string resource. I'm just feeling like that today. So now that we got that taken care of, hop over to your Java code and let's start importing everything we need. The first thing is view.motion event. Endpoint Android view.view. Import, what did I do wrong? I always write in prot Android view group. There you have view group. Import Android widget, and of course we need to reference the relative layout. Alright, so now that all this nonsense is taken care of, let's go ahead and get to the good stuff. the first thing I want to do is I want to get a reference to my entire layout, and it was named Bucky's layout. And this is of course because before we can move the button, what we want to do is just wait and see whenever the user taps the screen. So therefore, that's why we need of course, we did this before, just a reference to this layout. And once we have that, we can hop down to on create, and below set content view, let's set up a listener. So Bucky's layout, set this equal to view group. Alright, so view group, find view by ID, and let's go ahead and find our layout, r.id, Bucky's layout. So on this layout, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set on touch a listener, and new relative layout, on touch listener, and within here we have to implement the method public boolean on touch. So this is essentially going to wait to see whenever the user taps that layout, and whenever they do, it's going to call this method right in here. Now within this method, we're going to be writing quite a bit of code. It's actually not quite a bit, it's like 10 lines maybe, but the code's going to be responsible for moving this button. Now since this is already getting pretty cluttered and it's like way indented, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this over to a new method called new button, or excuse me, move button, and we're going to be making this right below there. But before we do, make sure to return true to let your app know that okay, we handled that touch event. So now, just for the sake of cleaning everything up, let's go ahead and make that, hold on a second, itching my eye, and now I'm itching my nose. Okay, now I'm done. Alright, so public void movie button. That'll be interesting. Alright, move button. And of course, to move the button, you probably need a reference to the button. So view Bucky's button, and set it equal to find view by ID, r.id.Bucky's button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be breaking this transition up into two steps. The first step is just positioning the button. We'll put it in the bottom right corner. Now the second step is changing the button's size. So it's going to move to the bottom right, and it's also going to grow simultaneously. So let me just add some comments. Change the position of the button, and we're going to change the size of the button after that. Now even though we do it after, it's all going to appear to the user like it's happening at the same time. So in order to change the position of the button, what we're actually going to do is we're going to go to relative layout, layout params, and position rules. And this is actually going to be a really long line of code because you need to add this stupid thing like all the time. Alright, so new relative layout, layout params, and inside here relative layout, layout params, wrap content. And let me just do this. Actually pass this in twice. I'll explain what it means in just a second. Alright, so just so you guys can see what's going on. So this right here is pretty much the rules on how we want to position items within that layout. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to wrap everything up. So it's pretty much just a nice tight package. And now with that package, the first thing I want to do is I want to add a rule to it. What do you want to do? Well, relative layout, align parent bottom, relative layout, yada yada, true. And by the way, this is going to make a lot more sense if you just pretend like this relative layout word is not there at all. So for example, you're just wrapping the content and you're aligning it on the bottom. So pretty much you're wrapping up the button and sticking it on the bottom. Now another thing I want to do is just real quick add it to the right as well. So align parent right. So all this code is going to do again is it's going to take the contents of this layout and stick it on the bottom right, aka position the button right here. Pretty simple, but they made us type this 600 times because they thought it was funny. So, you know, you got us that time. So after we make all those rules, what we have to do is we actually take that button and set layout params to position rules. Simple enough. So the only other thing I have to do after this is change the size of the button. Now the reason that we can't do it right here is because these are the parameters for the layout itself. Now what we actually need to do for the button is put view group layout params, there I go, and I'm just going to name this size rules since this was going to be responsible for changing the size. So for Bucky's button, there's a function called get layout params, and what this does is pretty much just gets information about whatever you call it on. It's essentially returning information about the button itself. So now one of the pieces of information is of course the width. So now we can access it through size rules and set it equal to like 450. I think that'll look pretty good. And also let's change the height. So size rules, height, set this equal to, why not 300? Sounds good. Now of course, just like before, you need to take Bucky's button, set layout params, which pretty much mean use these rules. What rules do you want to use? Well, just the size rules. So essentially we made some rules on how we should position it, set those rules, made some rules on the size of it, and set those ones as well. So now let's go ahead and, you know what, I forgot to start my stupid emulator, so let me pause this and start up. Alright, so here we have it. Let me go ahead and tap the screen, and our button moves to the bottom right. It grows, and see, that's weird. See, I thought what was going to happen is we were going to have a nice smooth animation instead of it just instantly hopping from the top left to the bottom right. Well, lucky for you, to do this it takes like 2 seconds. So if you ever want to just use a simple transition to either move it around or change something instantly, that's what you do. However, making a nice smooth animation is probably the easiest thing you ever learn. So let me go ahead and hide this, and the first thing we need to do is we need to import one more thing, Android.transition manager, and then after this what we want to do is we want to scroll all the way down to move button, and we're going to add one more line of code, and that's this transition manager, which is the package that we just imported, begin delayed transition, and we're just going to pass in Bucky's layout. Now this is pretty much going to give us the default transition, and let me just run this real quick. Now again, what we can do is we can add some more parameters to give us some more control over our animation. What this is going to do is it's essentially going to take your layout and look at the very first state of it, which is the default one that looks just like this, and the ending state, which is going to be the button in the bottom right, and it's going to just guess what transition you want. In other words, it's going to use the default animation of sliding the button down and growing it. However, if you ever want some more control over the details of our animation, then I'm going to show you guys how to do that in the next couple tutorials. But for right now, this default transition will be fine. So once this bad boy loads up, let me just click it right here, and as you can see, it now slides down in the bottom right instead of just hopping instantly. So there you go. There is your very basic tutorial on how to make transitions and animations. Again, in the next tutorial, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you guys how to have a little bit more control over the specifics of your animations. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.